Hey, lady. You can't be.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine, the home for all things horror. My name is Vic Shy, and this week, my friends, I'll be breaking down and discussing the sequel to 2011's The Woman, the 2019 horror film Darlin. Darlin follows the story of Darlin Cleek, who is now a teenager, and explores her relationship with Pollyana McIntosh's character, the Woman, who took custody of Darlin at the end of the previous film. The film is written and directed by Pollyana McIntosh herself, who also returns as the cannibalistic woman. The film is a surprisingly good sequel, although it does take itself a little too seriously with themes that heavily explore religion and human behavior. However, it's still a fun and bloody good time that I can't wait to talk about with you all. As always, thank you so much to everyone supporting the channel by subscribing and watching my videos. We are almost to 200 subscribers on the channel, and I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you haven't seen my video explaining The Woman, I'll be leaving a link to the video in the description down below. But without further ado, turn off the lights, and let's talk horror movies! Our movie begins with several somber shots of snowy woods during winter. We see the Woman and Darlin walking together along a trail of blood. They walk past an area of dirt where two mushrooms instantly grow out of the ground. We see a receptionist in an emergency room applying some makeup as a homeless man named Charlie kindly tries to get her attention. Whore! Darlin walks to the front of the emergency room and glares back at the Woman. Darlin walks up to the doors but gets spooked when they automatically open. She attempts to retreat but is suddenly struck by an incoming ambulance. Darlin is carried off on a stretcher by Dr. Grant and Nurse Tony, played by the always lovable Cooper Andrews, most notably known for his role as Jerry on The Walking Dead. Darlin wakes up and almost bites the doctor's hand. She jumps out of the stretcher and rushes to a nearby NICU, where we see her standing over a newborn baby, seemingly curious about the little thing. Tony manages to grab a hold of her and does his best to build a rapport with Darlin. He gets on his knees to be on the same level as her as we begin to see her calm down. Dr. Grant then sneaks up from behind and injects Darlin with a sedative.
I got her.
While the medical staff perform tests on Darlin, we see a flashback showing the Woman dragging the dead body of an unknown man through the snow. Dr. Grant reveals that Darlin suffered no injuries from being hit by the ambulance. He says that she will be taken to St. Philomenas, a Catholic boarding school for orphans. Tony isn't the biggest fan of Philomenas because they automatically turn him and his partner Robert down for adopting before even meeting them.
Maybe they were thinking about the children.
What a douche. Dr. Grant doesn't even try to be discreet about being discriminatory, which is an absolutely disgusting thing to experience, especially in the workplace. Come nightfall, we see the Woman standing in the tree line not far from the hospital. Charlie the homeless man gets ready for bed and cozies himself up on a bench, sleeping like a baby. This catches the attention of the Woman, who brutally slices Charlie's throat in his sleep. She then slices a chunk of his stomach and sticks it in her pocket. And that was the Woman's equivalent of me buying chicken nuggets from the McDonald's drive-thru. The Woman walks up to Darlin's hospital room window to offer her the chunk of Charlie meat. However, Darlin doesn't seem too happy with the Woman and closes the blinds. We then meet the Bishop, who instantly becomes the most unlikable character in the film, and rivals the douchebaggery of even Chris Cleek. The Bishop seems completely fascinated with the fact that Darlin is a feral and wild child, although he is told by Dr. Grant that she may not have always been this way. We are also introduced to Sister Jennifer, a nun from St. Philomenas who will be watching over Darlin. That night, Darlin and Tony share a sweet moment together before her release from the hospital. The Bishop and Sister Jennifer have a conversation about Darlin, and we see that he sees her as an opportunity to make money and help the church stay afloat. Tony drives Darlin to Philomenas, but she is understandably hesitant to go in. Totally lets her know that it's okay, and Sister Jennifer brings her into the home. The Bishop and Sister Jennifer have a discussion on the best way to teach Darlin how to talk. During this conversation, Sister Jennifer's past drug use is brought up, something she tells him is completely behind her. Sister Jennifer says that she plans on teaching Darlin how to speak through speech therapy. The bishop says that they must first get footage of Darlin acting like an animal, so that her evolution seems more impressive to the press.
We too can trick the devil into doing God's work.
We then meet Darlin's roommates and fellow students of Philomenas, Bug, Billy, Diana, and twins Lola and Lottie. Sister Jennifer and the bishop bring Darlin out to a chicken coop in the middle of a field. They trap her inside of a cage and the bishop believes that she looks too clean.
She looks normal. Perhaps we should dirty her up a bit.
Sister Jennifer hesitantly begins to smear dirt on Darlin's arms and face. This pisses off Darlin and she begins to scream and growl while running all over the place. The bishop catches the entire thing on video and then steps in to comfort Darlin after he has enough footage. Sister Jennifer is clearly shaken up by the event, but the bishop reassures her that it had to be done.
There can be no after without a before. Just as Jesus.
At this point in the film, I started to notice a few plot similarities to the woman. The bishop can easily be compared to Chris Cleek, who captured the woman in an attempt to civilize her in the previous film. They both treat the cannibals in an inhumane manner to teach them about civilization, which is very ironic. Sister Jennifer can be compared to Belle Cleek, who goes along with the bishop's plan, even though she knows it is wrong and clearly is bothered by it. While in the shower, Darlin has a flashback of her sharing a kiss with an injured boy inside of the woods. During Bible studies, Billy gets in trouble for reading from the Bible in an amused fashion, which makes all the students laugh. Sister Jennifer decides to bring her to the bishop for punishment, something that Billy pleads with her not to do. After bringing Billy to the bishop, we see that Sister Jennifer's hand is shaking, as if she feels guilty for what she's done. At this point, it's starting to become clear that the bishop may be more than money hungry. Back in class, Sister Grace attempts to make Darlin read from the Bible and says that no girl is exempt. This angers Darlin, who climbs out of the window and runs off into the distant woods. All the nuns and the bishop go looking for Darlin in the woods in the middle of the night. I thought that the film was going to take a drastic turn and have Darlin murder all of them inside the woods, but that didn't happen. Back at the hospital, we see that the woman is looking for Darlin. She gets confronted by a police officer and brutally murders him by biting into his neck. She stuffs the officer's body in the trash can, but not before stealing his firearm and sunglasses. She makes her way inside of the hospital and gets confronted by Dr. Grant, who confuses her for Charlie the homeless man, as she is now wearing his coat. This proves to be a fatal mistake made by Dr. Grant, as she stabs him with the knife and cuts his entire torso open, killing him. She then murders a random clown who smiles at her, and thank God for that, because clowns scared the hell out of me. The woman then runs into Jerry but doesn't kill him, as she saw he was the one taking care of Darlin during her time at the hospital. He tells the woman that he knows where she is and he will drive her there. During the ride, we see the police attempting to pull over Tony's car for some reason. This spooks the woman, who grabs a hold of the steering wheel and causes the vehicle to crash. Tony thankfully doesn't seem too beat up from the crash, and the woman swiftly got out and is seen hiding near a warehouse across the street. We see that the abandoned warehouse is now a homeless encampment where several homeless women reside. One of the women, named Mona, calls the woman Darlin, which makes her believe that Mona will lead her to her daughter. Back at Philomenas, Billy finds Darlin in the woods and introduces her to music. She takes Darlin by the hand and then brings her back to the school. During their first therapy session, Sister Jennifer apologizes to Darlin for the prior incident and says it will never happen again. She gives her a gingerbread man cookie, which we see Darlin takes a liking to. This shows that Darlin still has some memories left of her past life with her family. She was possibly remembering the time she made gingerbread cookies with her mom, Belle. Although since she cannot talk, we don't really know to what extent she remembers her past. We also see a cool little shot of the twins giggling and holding hands, which was undoubtedly a reference to The Shining. In another flashback, we finally see why Darlin was upset at the woman. We see that her boy companion has died and that the woman forces Darlin to eat him. We still don't know how he got there and injured himself or how he died, but it is clear that Darlin had feelings for him and is truly disturbed that she had to eat him. We see that just thinking about it now causes her to throw up. Darlin's speech has now dramatically improved. It may seem like it improved a little too fast, but also keep in mind that she was fully capable of talking in the previous film. Darlin has a conversation with the bishop where she asks if God will be able to get the devil out from inside of her. At night, Darlin has a creepy nightmare about the bishop grating her feet with a brittle brush, causing her to bleed. She wakes up screaming, which also wakes up all the other girls. The next day, Darlin gets a visit from Tony. He tells her that the woman came looking for her. Darlin reveals to Tony that she had 2 sisters and tells him about Peggy and Socket. In a flashback, we see that Peggy tragically died during childbirth and that Socket ran away afterwards. She tells him that the woman won't harm her because she wants the devil inside of her. The conversation is interrupted by the bishop, but Tony tells Darlin that he will be there when she gets out. At this time, we now get the confirmation for what we knew all along. The bishop is a freaking pedophile. He asks Darlin into his office and tells her to strip naked. He uses the lame excuse that God would like to see her naked body without any shame. She strips down to her bra and underwear and reveals that she is in fact pregnant. Darlin tells the bishop that it's the devil inside of her and that it killed Peggy.
You're scared too?
Why do you think that's the devil?
It killed Peggy.
The disgusting bishop is appalled by what he sees as he no longer considers Darlin innocent, which does not turn him on. He is one sick son of a bitch. That night, her roommates discover that she is pregnant and give her a list of options on how to get rid of the baby.
Our mom told us. She tried everything. Yeah, but God showed her. Here we are.
Darlin believes that giving birth to the baby is going to kill her, just like it did Peggy. Darlin gets baptized by the bishop, and we see that Darlin throwing up was actually part of her pregnancy symptoms. Sister Jennifer confronts the bishop about Darlin's pregnancy, believing that he possibly raped her. We discover that the bishop took Sister Jennifer's virginity when she was just a student, but that she never reported the incident. We see that the bishop has absolutely no remorse for his actions and sick ways, but he insists that he did not do anything to Darlin. He tells Sister Jennifer that it should be a man of God who takes a girl's virginity, and she threatens to expose him.
I am a direct descendant of the apostles. A direct descendant of the apostles.
We see the woman enter a baby clothing store and steal a baby carrier. How she managed to make her way into a clothing store and find exactly what she needs beats me. She then goes to a nearby playground and notices a baby playing around in a sandbox. The mother is sitting pretty far from her baby and isn't paying any attention to it. She attempts to grab the baby, but the mother finally pays attention to her child and quickly takes her away. She sees the newspaper on the bench with Darlin on the front page with a headline that reads, "Wild Child Saved by Local Church." We then see Darlin during a confession with the bishop where she reveals how she got pregnant. Darlin says that the injured boy she had feelings for was the one who got her pregnant. She says that he was injured during a rock climbing incident and that she saved him. Unfortunately, he is eventually killed by the woman where she then forces Darlin to eat him. She also reveals that they ate Peggy's dead body. Seeing Darlin attempt to convey her emotions with her limited speech is truly beautiful and heartbreaking to see at the same time.
A sin. To eat. When they smell of love.
The bishop is truly disturbed when he realizes that Darlin is a cannibal and asks her why she came here. We discover that the woman wanted Darlin to go to a hospital to deliver the baby and was subsequently brought to Philomenas. The woman brings the newspaper to Mona, who now understands that Darlin is the woman's child and that she is being held at the church. The woman and the group of homeless women all decide to go on a rescue mission for Darlin. We see a silhouette shot of the woman walking along the road that reminded me of the freaking poster from Band of Brothers for some reason. Band of cannibalistic homeless women? Darlin is now dressed in a beautiful white dress and veil as she prepares for her first communion. She is given a bracelet by the rest of the girls, who now accept her as one of their own. After they walk out of the room, however, Darlin downs an entire bottle of bleach as she believes it will get rid of the baby inside of her. The bishop introduces his boss, the Cardinal of Cincinnati, and the press, who are all present for Darlin's ceremony. We also see Tony and Robert sitting in the audience. He shows the audience the video of Darlin freaking out inside of the chicken coop. Darlin then walks into the room but refuses to eat the sacramental bread from the bishop. Sister Jennifer suddenly stands and says that the bishop is attempting to force her. She reveals to everyone that the bishop abuses children under his care, and then plays an audio recording of their previous conversation. Darlin then takes a huge chunk out of the bishop's hand. Darlin begins to cry in pain, and Billy realizes that she is about to give birth. Billy, Tony, and Sister Jennifer all tend to Darlin as the woman and her crew enter the church.
We've come for little Darlin.
The woman grabs a flag and stabs the bishop straight in the chest to his death. But the homeless women didn't sign up for no murder and quickly leave the premises. Darlin then gives birth to a seemingly healthy baby girl and asks the woman to take her far away from here. As we hear sirens blaring in the distance, the woman walks away with Darlin's baby on her back as the movie ends. Before the end credits, we see that the film is dedicated to the late Jack Ketchum, who tragically passed away on January 24th of 2018. May he rest in peace. And that, my friends, was Darlin. I feel that the film was a good follow-up to The Woman and did a great job in telling its narrative through Darlin's perspective. It wasn't a perfect movie, and I definitely prefer The Woman over it, but it wasn't a bad film by any means. While definitely slower paced and a little more dramatic than its predecessor, the film still had a decent amount of gore and horror elements sprinkled throughout, and a narrative that kept the film from being outright boring. I think that fans of The Woman will definitely enjoy this film, but it is definitely not for everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have a horror movie you'd like to see me break down, let me know in the comments down below. My friends, I cannot wait to see y'all right back here in the Horror Mine. Y'all stick around!